Una Park stood at the window of her small room and looked out at the purple sky of Velos Prime. 2 moons hung low on the horizon. The air outside was thin and cold, filled with gases that humans could barely breathe without help. She touched the small device behind her ear that filtered the atmosphere and let her survive on this alien world. She had been at the Galactic Unity Academy for 3 weeks now. 3 weeks of stares. 3 weeks of whispers. 3 weeks of being treated like a disease that might spread if anyone got too close. Back on Earth, the diplomatic corps had warned her about this. They had gathered all 12 human students in a gray room in Seoul and spoken to them for 6 hours straight. They told them to be patient. They told them to be polite. They told them that humanity's future among the stars depended on their behavior. What they did not tell her was how much it would hurt to be hated for simply being born on the wrong planet. The galaxy had a name for Earth. They called it a Category 12 Death World. This was the highest danger rating any planet could receive. Earth had massive predators with sharp teeth and claws. It had storms that could flatten cities. It had earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and fires. The gravity was strong enough to crush most alien species. The atmosphere was filled with oxygen, a gas so reactive that most civilizations considered it poison. The temperature swung from freezing cold to burning hot depending on where you stood and what time of year it was. And somehow, humans had not only survived there, they had thrived. They had built cities and machines and weapons. They had split the atom and walked on their moon. They had looked up at the stars and said, "We want to go there too." When humanity finally made contact with the galactic community 2 years ago, the reaction had been mixed. Some species were curious. Others were afraid. Many were angry that these small, soft creatures from a nightmare planet dared to consider themselves equals. The Galactic Unity Council had granted humanity provisional membership after months of debate. 12 human students were selected to attend the academy as a test. If they could prove that humans could work alongside other species without causing problems, full membership would follow. Una had been so proud when she received her acceptance letter. She was the youngest of the 12, only 19 years old. She had trained her whole life for this chance. She spoke 4 Earth languages and had learned 3 alien tongues. She had studied combat, diplomacy, engineering, and medicine. She had passed every test with top marks. None of that mattered here. On her first day, a tall Keth student had blocked her path in the corridor. The Keth were reptilian creatures with scales the color of old blood and eyes like yellow coins. They moved with the lazy confidence of apex predators. "Deathworlder," the Keth had said, his translation device turning his hisses into flat words. "You smell like fear and meat. Go back to your rock before someone breaks you." Una had said nothing. She had walked around him and continued to her class. She had felt his eyes on her back the whole way, burning with contempt. Since then, the harassment had only grown worse. Someone had torn her notes. Someone had spilled acid on her uniform. Someone had left a dead animal in her bed, a small creature from the local forests with fur like silk and eyes that had been very blue. Before they went cloudy with death, she reported nothing. The Academy's rules were clear. Fighting was forbidden outside of training. Complaints from provisional students were reviewed but rarely acted upon. The system was not designed to protect her. Her older brother, Junho, had called her 3 days ago through the long-range communication system. His face had been tired on the screen. He served on one of Earth's patrol ships, guarding the outer edges of human space. "How are you holding up?" he had asked. "Fine," she had lied. "Una, I know that voice." "What's happening?" She had told him some of it, not all. She did not want him to worry. She did not want him to do something stupid like request a transfer to come protect her. "They hate us," she had said simply. "They think we're monsters pretending to be civilized." Junho had been quiet for a long moment. Then he said something she would remember for the rest of her life. "Let them think what they want. You know what you are? You're a park. Our grandmother survived the war. Our grandfather rebuilt his village with his own hands. Our mother raised 2 children alone after father died. We don't break, Yuna. We bend, and then we snap back harder than before." She had smiled at that. A small smile, but real. Now, standing at her window, she repeated those words in her mind. She did not break. She would not break. A chime sounded at her door. She turned and pressed the panel to open it. Standing outside was another human student. A young man named Doan, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. He was studying engineering and had the room 3 doors down from hers. "Tactical theory in 20 minutes, he said. "Want to walk together?" Yuna nodded. There was safety in numbers, even if the number was only 2. They walked through the curved corridors of the academy together. Other students moved past them, some alone and some in groups. Most ignored the 2 humans. A few made faces of disgust. One small creature with too many legs actually changed direction to avoid being near them. "I heard something," Doan said quietly as they walked. "Torvak has been talking. The Keth Senior, who blocked you on the first day. He's been telling people that humans don't belong here, that we cheated to get accepted, that someone needs to teach us our place." "Let him talk," Yuna said. "Yeah, I'm serious, Yuna. He's connected. His father is on the Dominion Council. He could make real trouble for us. Then we'll deal with it when it comes." They reached the door to the tactical theory classroom. Yuna paused before entering. She took a breath of the filtered air. She straightened her spine. She made her face calm and empty. Whatever waited for her inside, she would face it the way her family had always faced hardship. With patience, with strength, with the quiet certainty that she had survived worse than anything these aliens could imagine. She stepped through the door. 40 pairs of alien eyes turned to look at her. 40 mouths, beaks, and orifices curled with various expressions of contempt. In the back row, Torvak sat with 3 of his friends. His yellow eyes found hers across the room. His mouth stretched into something that might have been a smile on a human face, but looked like a threat on his. Yuna walked to her seat without looking at him. She sat down. She opened her datapad, and she waited for whatever was coming next. The classroom was quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. Instructor Melith had been teaching about fleet positioning when her communicator beeped. She looked at it, frowned, and announced she needed to step out for a priority transmission. She would return in 10 minutes, the moment the door closed behind her. The atmosphere in the room changed. Yuna felt it like a shift in temperature. She kept her eyes on her datapad, pretending to review the notes from the lecture. Her heart was already beating faster. Her body knew something was wrong before her mind did. Shadows fell across her desk. She looked up slowly. Torvak stood directly in front of her. His 3 packmates flanked him on either side. Dren was the largest, with arms thick as tree trunks and a scar running down the left side of his face. Salak was thinner and moved with nervous energy, his clawed feet clicking on the floor. The 4th was not Keth at all. His name was Crix, a Veloci, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that ended in delicate fingers. The other students in the room watched in silence. None of them moved to help. None of them called for security. They simply sat and stared, waiting to see what would happen to the Deathworlder. Torvak leaned forward. His breath smelled like copper and rotting vegetation. "Deathworlder," he said through his translator, "we have decided that your kind does not belong at this academy. You are a mistake, a political gesture, a joke that has gone on long enough." Yuna said nothing. She kept her breathing steady. Inside her body, chemicals were already flooding her bloodstream. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, a cocktail of hormones that would have been classified as combat stimulants on most civilized worlds. Humans produced them naturally when threatened. It was one of the many gifts that evolution had given them for surviving on Earth. "You have 2 choices," Torvak continued. "Withdraw your application and return to your toxic rock, or we remove you ourselves, painfully." Yuna's mind was racing, but her face stayed calm. She measured the distance between herself and each attacker. She noted their positions, their body language, their weapons. Dren had a ceremonial blade strapped to his hip. Salak carried nothing visible. Crix had his 4 hands hidden behind his back. "I would rather not," she said quietly. Torvak's yellow eyes widened. Then he laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. Wrong answer. His clawed hand shot toward her throat. What happened next would be reviewed thousands of times across the galaxy. Security footage captured every moment. Analysts would slow it down frame by frame, studying the movements of the small human female who had never weighed more than 54 kilograms in her entire life. In the first 3 seconds, Yuna was already moving before Torvak's claws reached her. She dropped out of her chair, letting it fall backward with a crash. Her palm hit the floor, and she used it to pivot her entire body. Her knee came up fast and hard, driving into a cluster of nerves behind Torvak's forward leg. The Keth were ambush predators. They had evolved to strike fast and kill quickly. They had never needed to develop resistance to pain because they had never expected to be the ones receiving it. The nerve cluster Yuna hit was not well protected. Agony exploded through Torvak's body like fire. He collapsed, screaming in seconds 4 through 6. Dren reacted. His hand went to his ceremonial blade, drawing it with practiced speed. The blade was curved and sharp, designed for cutting through tough hide. He swung it at Yuna's neck, expecting her to freeze or flee like any sensible prey animal. Yuna did neither. She caught his wrist with both hands and twisted. The joint rotated past its natural limit. Bones shifted. Tendons stretched and tore. Dren roared in pain, and his grip on the blade loosened. Yuna used his own momentum against him, pulling him forward and driving his skull into the edge of the desk beside her. The impact made a sound like a melon hitting concrete. Dren went limp before his body finished falling. In seconds, 7 through 9, Salak tried to run. This was the smartest thing any of them did, but it was also useless. Humans were pursuit predators. Their ancestors had hunted by chasing prey across open ground for hours until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Speed over short distances was not their specialty, but acceleration was. Yuna crossed 4 meters in less than 2 seconds. She caught Salak from behind, wrapping her arm around his throat. She squeezed both sides of his neck, pressing on the blood vessels that fed his brain. On Earth, this was called a chokehold. Properly applied, could render someone unconscious in seconds without causing permanent damage. Salak struggled for a moment. Then his eyes rolled back, and he went limp in her arms. She lowered him to the floor gently. In seconds 10 through 14, Crix made his move. His 4 hands came out from behind his back, and in them was something that should not have existed within these walls. A neural disruptor. Smuggling weapons into the academy was a serious crime. Possessing a neural disruptor without authorization is punishable by years of imprisonment. None of that mattered to Crix. He was panicking. He aimed the device at Yuna and pulled the trigger. The beam hit her left shoulder. On any other species in the known galaxy, this would have caused immediate and total paralysis. The neural disruptor worked by overwhelming the nervous system with conflicting signals, shutting down voluntary muscle control, but humans had a nervous system that made no sense. It was redundant in strange ways, with backup pathways and alternative routes that had evolved over millions of years of surviving impossible conditions. The disruptor made Yuna's arm go numb. Nothing else. She crossed the remaining distance between them in a heartbeat. Her functioning hand closed around Crix's wrist and squeezed. 3 of his fingers broke with small snapping sounds. The disruptor fell to the floor. Yuna caught his upper arm with her good hand, ripped his lower arm with her numb one, and rotated. His shoulder joint popped out of its socket. He made a high whistling sound that his translator could not convert into words. Then she released him, and he crumpled to the floor beside his weapon. 14 seconds. 4 attackers. All of them down. Yuna stood in the center of the classroom, breathing slightly harder than normal. Her left arm was starting to tingle as feeling returned. Her heart pounded in her chest. Around her, 40 alien students sat frozen in their seats, staring at her with expressions she had never seen before. Fear. Pure, honest, primitive fear. The door opened. Instructor Melith walked back into the room, her attention on her communicator. She looked up, saw the 4 bodies on the floor, and stopped moving entirely. Cadet Park, she said slowly. What happened here? Una pointed to the neural disruptor lying beside Crix's unconscious form. They attacked me, she said. Her voice was steady. They had a weapon. I defended myself. Melith looked at the weapon. She looked at the 4 fallen students. She looked at the small human female standing among them, without a scratch on her body. She said finally. Security has been notified. Please remain where you are. Una nodded. She had nothing to hide. The cameras had seen everything. She did not know it yet. But those 14 seconds had just changed the course of galactic history. The news spread faster than light itself. Within an hour, every major information network in the galaxy was running the story. A human cadet had attacked 4 students at the Galactic Unity Academy. She had brutalized them without mercy. She had shown her true nature as a savage from a death world. That was the story the Keth Dominion wanted told, and they had the power to make sure it spread. They did not mention that Una had been surrounded by 4 larger attackers. They did not mention the death threats. They did not mention the neural disruptor, a weapon that had been illegally smuggled into the academy. They showed only the security footage of Una taking down her attackers, edited to remove the moments before the violence began. On screens across 1,000 worlds, species who had never seen a human before watched a small female creature systematically destroy 4 opponents in 14 seconds. They watched her break bones and dislocate joints. They watched her move with speed and precision that should have been impossible for something so small, and they were. Terrified in the great council chamber on the station world of Central Unity, representatives from 340 species gathered for an emergency session. The chamber was a massive dome filled with floating platforms, each one holding delegates from a different civilization. Translators hummed constantly, converting the speeches into hundreds of languages at once. Ambassador Nari Choi stood, alone on humanity's small platform near the outer edge of the chamber. She was 53 years old, the gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades, spent fighting battles with words instead of weapons. She had served as humanity's senior diplomat to the Council since first contact. She had never felt more alone than she did right now. The evidence is clear, declared the Keth representative, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. The human species is inherently violent. They cannot control their primitive instincts. They attacked our citizens without provocation. There was provocation, Nari said, her voice amplified across the chamber. The footage was edited. The full recording shows that Cadet Park was threatened and assaulted first. One of the attackers was carrying an illegal weapon. Lies from a Deathworlder, the Keth representative hissed. We have submitted our evidence. We demand justice. 17 species rose to support him. One after another, they called for humanity's immediate expulsion from the galactic community. They called for all humans to be banned from Unity space. They called for Unipark to be surrendered to Keth's custody for what they called rehabilitation. Nari knew what rehabilitation meant in the Keth Dominion. Their facilities had a 3% survival rate for their own citizens. For a human, there would be no survival at all. They would take Una apart piece by piece, studying her to find weaknesses they could exploit. She would die on an examination table. Far from home, surrounded by creatures who saw her as nothing more than a specimen, the vote was called. 212 species voted to expel humanity. 119 abstained. Only 9 voted against. The motion passed. Nari stood very still on her platform as the results were announced. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply looked up at the great dome above her and thought about all the work that had been wasted, all the hopes that had been crushed, all the dreams of a better future that had just been murdered by fear and politics. Then she activated her communication device and sent a single message to Earth. It said only 2 words. They voted. On Earth. Admiral Kang Tai-ho received the message in his office at Space Command. headquarters in Seoul. The building was old by military standards. Built in the early days of humanity's space program, through his window, he could see the lights of the city stretching to the horizon. Millions of people going about their lives without knowing that their future had just been decided by aliens who had never set foot on their world. He had served for 40 years. He had commanded ships and fleets. He had watched humanity take its first steps beyond the solar system. He had believed, truly believed, that they were ready to join the galactic community as equals. Now he understood the truth. The galaxy did not want equals. They wanted humanity to bow, to crawl, to accept whatever treatment was given to them and be grateful for it. His door opened. Ambassador Nari walked in, her face pale but her eyes dry. "They want Yuna," she said. "They want to take her back to Keth space." "I know, Taiho. We cannot let that happen. She is 19 years old. She did nothing wrong." "I know." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, a shuttle was rising from the spaceport, carrying passengers to the orbital stations above. Such an ordinary sight. Such a reminder of everything humanity had built with nothing but their own hands and determination. "My grandfather fought in the war," he said quietly. "Not the space war. The old war. The one where humans fought other humans over lines drawn on maps. He told me once that the worst thing about it was not the fighting. It was the waiting. Waiting to see if the enemy would come. Waiting to see if peace would hold. Waiting while others decided his fate, he turned to face Nari. I am done waiting. Humanity is done waiting. We did not crawl out of ice ages and plagues and world wars to be treated like animals by species who have never had to fight for anything. What are you saying?" "I am saying that if the galaxy wants to punish a 19-year-old girl for defending herself, then the galaxy needs to learn what happens when you threaten what we love." He walked to his desk and activated the secure communication system. Lines connected to every major military installation on Earth and in orbit. Commanders and captains appeared on screens around the room, waiting for orders. "This is Admiral Kang Taiho," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Authorization code, Songbird 77. All vessels are to move to combat readiness immediately. All reserves are to report to their stations. All shipyards are to begin emergency production protocols." The room was silent. As of now, the United Earth Government formally rejects the Council's resolution. We will not surrender Cadet Park. We will not accept expulsion from Unity Space. Any attempt to take our people by force will be met with force. He took a breath. As of 0600 Universal Standard Time, humanity is at war. The words hung in the air. On screens around the room, commanders and captains nodded. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. They had always known, deep in their hearts, that this day might come. Nari stared at him. "Taiho, we have 43 ships. The Keth alone have thousands. Then we will build more. This is madness, no." He shook his head slowly. "This is what Earth made us. We did not choose to be born on a death world. We did not choose to be survivors. But that is what we are, and the galaxy is about to learn what that means." He turned back to the window. In the distance, more shuttles were rising from the surface. The sky was full of lights, human lights, carrying human souls to human ships that would soon be going to war. "Contact the Academy," he said. "Tell Yuna that she is not alone. Tell her that Earth is coming for her. And tell her, ... His voice softened. "Tell her to hold on. Her family is coming." The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They just did not know it yet. When humanity declared war, the Keth Dominion laughed. Their admirals gathered in their war rooms and reviewed the data on human military strength. 43 ships. Most of them were small exploration vessels converted for combat. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards. Their shields were weak. Their numbers were pathetic. The Keth assembled a battle group of 200 warships. They called it the Cleansing Fleet. Its mission was simple: jump to the human home system, destroy their tiny navy, and force their surrender. The whole operation would take less than a day. What the Keth did not understand was human industrial capacity. On Earth, factories that had been silent for decades roared back to life. Shipyards that had been building exploration vessels switched to warship production overnight. Workers who had never touched a weapon signed up by the millions, ready to defend their home. Human history was filled with moments like this. When their backs were against the wall, when their existence was threatened, something changed in them. Fear became anger. Anger became determination. Determination became unstoppable force. In the first week, 12 new warships launched from orbital construction platforms. They were not pretty. They were not elegant. They were rough and ugly and armed with every weapon human engineers could fit onto their frames. But they worked. In the second week, 22 more ships launched. Then 34 more were laid down. Human factories ran day and night. Human workers slept in shifts. Human scientists abandoned every other project to focus on one goal: survival. By the time the Keth cleansing fleet arrived at the edge of human space, humanity's navy had tripled in size. Commander Park Junho waited for them at the outer boundary of the solar system. In the cold darkness beyond the orbit of the farthest planet, his fleet was small compared to the Keth force. 60 ships against 200. But Junho had something the Keth did not have. He had a reason to fight that went beyond duty or politics. His little sister was still trapped at the academy, waiting for rescue. Every hour she spent there was an hour she was in danger. He would not let her down. The Keth admiral sent a transmission as his fleet approached. Human commander, the translation said, "You are outmatched. You cannot win this battle. Surrender the war criminal Una Park, and we will show mercy. Refuse, and we will destroy you." Junho smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I do not think you understand what you are dealing with," he replied. "My name is Park Junho. The girl you want is my sister. And I am going to explain something to you that your species seems to have forgotten." He leaned forward in his command chair. "Humans do not give up our families. Not for you. Not for anyone. You can bring 1,000 ships, and we will still fight. You can burn our worlds, and we will rebuild them. You can kill us, and our children will rise to take our place. That is what Earth made us. That is what we are." He cut the transmission. The Battle of the Outer Reach lasted 11 hours. The Keth fought with doctrine. They had formations and strategies developed over centuries of warfare against other species. They knew exactly how to use their numbers to overwhelm a smaller force. They knew how to coordinate their fire and shield their weak points. But humans did not fight with doctrine. Humans fought with fury. Their ships were smaller and faster than the Keth vessels. They darted between the larger warships like predators among slow prey. They took risks that no sane species would take, flying into the gaps in enemy formations and firing at point-blank range. Keth ships expected their opponents to retreat when damaged. Human ships kept fighting until they could no longer move. Keth crews surrendered when the battle turned against them. Human crews never surrendered at all. And then there was the human ability to endure. Most species could not handle prolonged combat. Their minds broke under the stress. Their bodies tired. After a few hours, their performance degraded significantly. Humans had evolved on a world where danger was constant. Their ancestors had spent millions of years running from predators, hunting for food, and fighting each other for survival. Their bodies produced chemicals that kept them alert and focused for hours beyond what should have been possible. They did not tire. They did not slow down. They got angrier. 6 hours into the battle, the Keth admiral realized something was wrong. His fleet should have won by now. Instead, he had lost 40 ships, and the humans were still fighting. 8 hours in, he had lost 80 ships. The humans had lost only 15 to 10 hours in. He ordered a retreat. His remaining vessels turned and began to flee toward the jump point that would take them back to Keth space. The humans followed Junho. Pursued the fleeing fleet for another hour, destroying 20 more ships before finally breaking off. He did not want to destroy them all. He wanted survivors. He wanted witnesses who could return to the Keth's dominion and tell everyone what they had seen. The message was simple. Do not touch our people. When the news of the battle reached the Galactic Unity Council, everything changed. The species who had voted to expel humanity suddenly found reasons to reconsider. The Veloci ambassador personally traveled to Earth to deliver an official apology. The Orali Confederation offered humanity a defensive pact. 3 other species withdrew their membership from the Council entirely. Unwilling to risk being caught in a war against the Deathworlders in secure rooms across the galaxy, intelligence analysts rewrote their assessments of human military capability. The old reports had called humanity a minor regional power. The new reports used different words. Humans do not simply survive, one classified document stated. They adapt. They overcome. They improve. Every challenge makes them stronger. Every defeat teaches them something new. They are not the largest species in the galaxy. They are not the most advanced. But they may be the most dangerous. Another report was more direct. Engaging humanity was a mistake. Making them angry was catastrophic. Do not repeat this error. The war was not over. The Keth Dominion refused to surrender. They had too much pride, too much anger, too much invested in their position as a major galactic power. They could not accept that a species they considered primitive had defeated them, so they sent more fleets. And humanity destroyed them. They formed alliances with other species who hated humans. And humanity broke those alliances with a combination of military, pressure, and diplomatic offers that the Allies could not refuse. They tried to assassinate human leaders. And humanity's intelligence services stopped every attempt. Then responded with operations that left Keth leaders afraid to sleep at night. The war lasted 6 months. In that time, humanity built 300 new warships. They developed weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. They forged alliances with species who recognized that the balance of power was shifting, and at the end of those 6 months, the Keth Dominion surrendered. The terms were simple. All charges against Unipark were dropped. The Keth would pay reparations for the damages caused by the war they had started. And humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Unity Council. With all the rights and privileges that came with it, some species complained. Some said the terms were too harsh or too lenient. Some said humanity had somehow cheated, that their victory was impossible, that there must be some explanation besides the obvious one. But most of the galaxy simply watched and learned. Humans were not monsters. They were not savages. They were exactly what they appeared to be. Survivors from a world that had tried to kill them every single day. They had not asked for war. They had not wanted conflict. But when it came to them, they had met it head-on, and they had won in his office on Earth. Admiral Kong Tai-ho finally allowed himself to rest. The war was over. Humanity was safe. His people could finally look at the stars without fear, but he knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Now they would have to learn to respect them, and that would take much longer. The shuttle descended through the purple clouds of Velos Prime. Yuna watched the Academy grow larger through the viewport. 6 months had passed since she had last seen those white towers and curved walkways. 6 months since 4 attackers had surrounded her in a classroom. 6 months since. 14 seconds had changed everything. She was not the same person who had left. The war had kept her on Earth for most of that time. She had become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. Her face had appeared on recruitment posters and news broadcasts. People had stopped her in the streets to shake her hand or thank her for her service. Soldiers had saluted her even, though she was still technically a cadet. She had hated every moment of it. Yuna did not feel like a hero. She had defended herself against attackers who wanted to hurt her. That was all. She had not asked for a war. She had not asked for fame. She had only wanted to finish her education and serve her people. But the galaxy did not care what she wanted. The galaxy had its own story to tell, and she was at the center of it now. The shuttle landed on the Academy's main platform. When the doors opened, she found Instructor Melith waiting for her. The instructor's face was unreadable, but her posture was different than Yuna remembered. Straighter, more respectful. Det Park, Melith said. Welcome back to the Academy. Your status has been updated. You are now classified as a protected diplomatic asset. What does that mean? It means that anyone who threatens you will be answering to the full weight of the United Earth's government. And after recent events, most species have decided that is not a weight they wish to bear. Yuna nodded slowly. She supposed that was meant to be reassuring. It did not feel that way. They walked together through the corridors of the academy. Everything looked the same as she remembered, but the reactions to her presence were completely different. Students who had once whispered insults behind her back now stepped aside to let her pass. Creatures who had looked at her with contempt now watched her with something closer to respect or fear. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. She reached her old room and found that her belongings had been kept exactly as she had left them. Her clothes were still folded in the drawers. Her family pictures were still arranged on the shelf. The small device her grandmother had given her before she left Earth still sat on the desk. A simple stone from the beach in Busan that had no value to anyone except Yuna. She picked it up and held it in her palm. It was warm from the room's heating system. She closed her eyes and thought about home. A chime sounded at her door. She opened it to find Doan standing outside. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes and a scar on his chin that had not been there before. "Yuna," he said. "You came back, I said I would." He smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "The other human students are still here. We all made it through. Some of us had trouble, but nothing like what you faced. The academy has been different since the war ended. Different how? Quieter. More careful. Species that used to ignore us now want to be our friends. It is strange," Yuna thought about that. Strange was one word for it. Exhausting was another. "I have to go to tactical theory," she said. "Instructor Melith wants me to help with a lecture."
Ow.
Doan's eyebrows rose. "Help with a lecture? You? Apparently I have practical experience that would be valuable to share." She did not know how she felt about that. But orders were orders. The tactical theory classroom was full when she arrived. 40 students sat in their seats watching the door. When Yuna walked in, every head turned to look at her. She recognized some faces from before. Others were new, students who had arrived during the months she was gone. In the back row, she saw something that surprised her. A young Keth sat among the others, his scales a lighter shade than Torvax had been. He was one of the first Keth exchange students since the war ended. His people had lost badly, and now they were trying to rebuild relations with the species they had underestimated. Beside the Keth sat a Veloci, pale blue and nervous-looking, and beside the Veloci sat a dozen other species who had once signed petitions calling for her expulsion. Now they all watched her with careful attention. Instructor Melith stood at the front of the room. "Cadet Park will be assisting with today's lecture," she announced. "The topic is asymmetric combat against superior numbers. Please pay attention." She gestured for Yuna to take the floor. Yuna walked to the center of the room. She looked out at the assembled students, these representatives of species from across the galaxy. Some of them had parents who had fought against humanity in the war. Some of them had lost family members. She did not feel anger toward them. She felt nothing at all. "There is only one lesson that matters," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. "Never mistake kindness for weakness." She paused, letting the words settle. "When humans first made contact with the galactic community, we wanted peace. We wanted friendship. We wanted to learn from you and share what we knew. We sent diplomats and students and scientists. We followed your rules. We accepted your insults. We tried to prove that we deserved to be treated as equals." She looked around the room. "Some of you took that as weakness. You thought that because we were patient, we were soft. You thought that because we did not fight back against harassment, we could not fight at all. You thought that because we came from a dangerous world, we must be primitive and brutal." The room was completely silent. "You were wrong about all of it." She began to walk slowly between the rows of desks. "Earth did not make us fragile. Earth made us relentless. Every human you will ever meet is the descendant of people who survived ice ages and plagues and predators and wars. Our planet tried to kill us every single day, and we survived. Not because we were the strongest or the fastest or the most numerous, We survived because we never gave up, because we adapted to every challenge, because when something threatened us, we found a way to overcome it. She stopped beside the young Keth student. Your people thought you could threaten one of us and we would simply accept it. That was a mistake. Humans protect our own. We will fight for our families. We will fight for our friends. We will fight for people we have never met if we believe they deserve protection. The Keth met her eyes. He did not look away. That is not brutality, Una continued. That is love. The same love that makes us build hospitals and schools. The same love that makes us help strangers in need. The same love that makes us reach out to other species, hoping for friendship instead of conflict. She walked back to the front of the room. We did not want this war. We wanted to be part of your community. We wanted to share the stars with you. And we still want that. But we will not be pushed. We will not be threatened. We will not surrender our people to satisfy someone else's pride. She faced the class directly. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this. Never assume that because something looks soft, it cannot hurt you. Never assume that kindness means inability. And never, ever corner something that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to fight. The room remained silent for a long moment. Then the young Keth in the back row slowly began to clap. His hands made a soft sound against each other, the Keth version of applause. The Veloci beside him joined in. Then another student, and another, until the entire room was making sounds of appreciation in a dozen different ways. Una stood at the front and watched them. She did not smile. She did not bow. She simply stood there, a small human female from a death world, and let them see her for what she truly was. Not a monster, not a savage, just a survivor. After the lecture ended, Una returned to her room. She sat on her bed and looked out at the purple sky through her window. The 2 moons were rising, just as they had been on her first night at the academy. Everything had changed since then. She had changed. The galaxy had changed, but some things remained the same, her communicator chimed. She answered it and saw her brother's face on the screen. Junho said, "How was your first day back?" "Strange," she admitted. "Everyone is being so polite. It feels wrong," he laughed. "Get used to it. You are famous now." "The girl who started a war?" "I did not start anything. They attacked me." "I know. But the galaxy does not always care about facts. They care about stories. And your story is a good one." She thought about that. A good story. Maybe that was what humanity needed. Not just strength, but a story that showed what they truly were. Not monsters from a death world, but people who loved their families and protected their friends and never stopped fighting for what they believed in. "Junho," she said, "thank you. For coming to get me. For everything. You're my sister. I would have burned down the galaxy for you." She smiled. For the first time in months, it felt real. "I know," she said. "That is what makes us human." Outside her window, the stars were appearing one by one in the darkening sky. Billions of worlds. Trillions of beings. A galaxy that had learned to fear humanity and was now slowly learning to understand them. It would take time. It would take patience. It would take the same determination that had carried her ancestors through ice ages and wars. But humanity had time. They had patience. And they had something no other species seemed to understand. They had each other. And that was enough.